So this summer, we've traveled quite a journey here with the series Fatherhood on Purpose, and today is the last episode in that series. Here's what we've covered. The first episode, A Father's Heart. We talked about well-intentioned men who love their kids, but who struggle with keeping first things first. Next, the power of purpose. The idea of the universal power of purpose, no matter what area of life you apply it to, and how stating a clear, compelling purpose helps a man keep focused. Next, I define for you the purpose of a father friend, what that means and how it works, and how in the end it can bring the impact and connection you want with your children. In episode 4, I talked about what often stands in the way of that purpose, our wounds from our own childhood, how we tend to father from default rather than by design, how we have patterns that resulted from pain, and how they manifest themselves in fatherhood. I stated the need for courageous self-awareness and healing. In episode 5, I laid out the plan, the method for fatherhood on purpose, and that is the father-friend model. How to lead and love with intention in each stage of your child's development, the roles you play in each, and the actions and attitudes you need for them. Now today, in this episode, we're going to finish up by stating what might be the most important part of this whole series, because knowing your purpose and actually living it are two very different things. One is a feeling you have on a good Sunday morning. The other is a decision you make on a Tuesday when your kid slams a door and you're exhausted and nobody's watching to see if you handle it right. That's what the 7 commitments of a father friend are for. They're not a checklist for perfect dads. I want to say that clearly up front, because if you're anything like me, you hear the word commitment and your brain immediately starts keeping score of every time you've broken one. That's not what this is. These are honest, heartfelt intentions. They're the anchor points. And today, we're going to walk through all 7 one at a time. And for each one, I want to give you what it means, why it matters, and what it actually costs you, and what it builds if you stick with it. These are in the first person, and as I explain them, I want you to consider making each one of these a commitment in your heart. The first commitment is this: I will choose self-awareness. This is the one everything else sits on top of, so we start here. What it means is simple to say, but hard to do. It says, I will examine my past, my wounds, my wiring, and the ways they shape how I parent. Most of us are fathering on autopilot more than we'd like to admit. We're reacting out of what our own dad did or didn't do, and we've never stopped to ask why. I've mentioned before the trigger question that I use, and I still use it. Not just what happened, but why did I react as I did? That second question is the one that actually changes you. It costs you something, though. Self-awareness means looking at the fact that some of your reactions aren't really about your kid at all. They're about a version of you that got hurt 30 or 40 years ago and never healed. That's a courageous thing to look at directly. Now, I want to be careful here, because this can get twisted into something it's not. I'm not talking about walking around plagued with self-doubt, replaying every mistake, drowning in constant self-condemnation. Listen, I've been there, and that helps nothing. That's not self-awareness. That's just a different kind of dysfunction, wearing a spiritual costume. This is simply a call to have an honest awareness about yourself. What it builds when you do it right is a dad who refuses to father from default or damage, a dad who parents on purpose instead of on reflex. That healing, that kind of fathering, is worth the discomfort. Commitment number 2 follows right behind it. It says, I will break the cycle. Whatever dysfunction you inherited, as we just mentioned, we all have. Either it's anger, abandonment, passivity, perfectionism, take your pick. You name it, you face it, and then you choose to rewrite the story. This is where self-awareness turns into action. It's one thing to know why you react the way you do. It's another thing to actually do something different next time. Breaking a cycle is some of the hardest work a man will ever do, because cycles are comfortable in the worst way. and they certainly need God's help to break. Why are they comfortable? Because they're familiar. Your mind knows how to do the thing your dad did, even when your heart knows it's wrong. These patterns don't look like wounds to you. They actually look like your personality. They look like just who you are. And that's what makes them so hard to break. You're not fighting an obvious enemy. You're fighting something that feels like your own identity. It requires deep change, and that's hard. What it costs you is the discipline to catch yourself mid-pattern and choose differently, over and over, sometimes for years before it feels natural. But what it builds is an interruption to a dysfunctional legacy. Your kids inherit a different story than you did. That's not a small thing. In fact, that might be the biggest thing you ever do as a father. The third commitment is one I love because it's less about fixing something broken and more about building something good. This one says, I will build positive emotional memory. Here's a truth to write down. Your kids won't remember every word you say. They will, however, remember how you made them feel. Every dad wants to believe his lectures are landing, that the wisdom is sinking in word for word. Dad, it's not. What sinks in is the feeling your child gets. Did being around him feel safe? Did it feel warm? Or did it look like walking on eggshells, wondering which version of him I was going to get when he walked through the door tonight? Was it always critical? Or was it guilt-ridden? Was it distant without emotional connection? This commitment means you can't just assume good moments will happen. You have to create them. Family dinners, bedtime conversations, the drive to practice when you actually ask questions and listen to the answers instead of just filling silence with a podcast. What it builds is a reservoir in your child's heart, a place from which they will draw strength and worth and perseverance and courage, all because of the way you made them feel. And also, when your teenager is struggling later and deciding whether to open up to you or shut you out, they're drawing from that reservoir of memory. Make sure there's something positive in it. Fourth commitment, I will parent with the end in mind. This one requires you to hold two things in tension. It says, I'm not aiming for short-term compliance. I'll make difficult decisions today for long-term gain. Most parenting frustration, if you trace it back far enough, comes from us measuring success by the wrong clock. We want the tantrum to stop right now. We want the teenager to agree with us at the dinner table tonight. But that's not the goal. The goal is a 25-year-old who trusts you, who sees you as someone with integrity, who wants a relationship with you when he doesn't have to have one anymore. What that costs you is short-term peace. You can get your kids to like you, but in the end, will they respect you when they're adults? Sometimes doing the right long-term thing means today is harder, not easier. It means a particular moment is difficult because the future you want is better. Maybe you have to discipline your child today, which gets really hard to do. But you know who they are, and you love them too much to let them behave in that way because in the end, that will hinder and constrain that wonderful person you know they are, keeping that person from coming out. So you discipline today in order to get character tomorrow. Maybe your kid's mad at you tonight so that he respects you in 15 years. That's a trade most of us don't want to make in the moment. But what it builds is exactly what I just said. Trust, integrity, and a relationship that lasts past the years they're under your roof. The fifth commitment is the one I probably talk about the most because I think it's the one most dads get lopsided. It says, I will embrace both authority and affection, lead with strength and tenderness, correct without crushing. I want to say this plainly because it could sound just like a clever line if you don't unpack it. Discipline without love breeds resentment, and love without discipline enables rebellion. You need both love and leadership. A dad who's all authority raises a kid who either breaks under the weight of it or rebels against it the first chance he gets. A dad who's all about affection raises a child who never learns to handle a boundary anywhere else in life because dad never gave him practice to do so. The cost of this commitment is that it's genuinely harder to hold both than just to pick one and lean into it. It would be easier to just be the strict dad or just be the fun dad. Those are simpler roles to play. Holding both takes more energy, more discernment, and honestly, more prayer, because you're recalibrating in real time depending upon what your kid actually needs in that moment. What it builds, though, is a kid who experiences you as safe and strong at the same time. That's rare. That's valuable. That's the whole tension of this thing called the father friend. Sixth commitment, I will stay teachable. It says, I will keep learning from mentors, from scripture, from failure, and even from my own kids. I will keep growing. This is the humility commitment. It doesn't get easier with age. If anything, it gets harder because the older you get, the more you think you've already figured everything out. My friend Joey has said things to me over the years that I didn't want to hear in the moment, but needed to hear anyway. That's what a mentor's for. Somebody who loves you enough to tell you the truth instead of just what you want to hear. That's what a true friend does. He loves you as you are, but he loves you too much to let you stay as you are. Now, this commitment requires you to give up your pride, plain and simple. It means when you're wrong and your teenager calls you on it, it means actually taking it instead of getting defensive about it. What it builds is a dad who's still growing when his kids are growing. And that matters more than you'd think because kids can see whether their parents are still becoming something or whether they're prideful, know all the answers, are never wrong, and stopped somewhere back in their 30s from growing. And the seventh commitment, the one I want to finish on, says, I will keep showing up, even when I'm tired, even when I blew it yesterday. The most powerful thing I can offer my children is presence. This is the commitment that covers for all your failures in the other six. You're not going to nail self-awareness every day. You're not going to hold authority and affection in perfect balance every single time. You're going to blow it. Every dad listening to this podcast blows it, including the one talking right now. But showing up again the next day, that's what makes you a father friend instead of just a man who had good intentions once. The cost is obvious. It's effort. It's fatigue. It's doing this when you genuinely don't feel like it. What it builds, however, is trust that compounds over years. Your kids learn that you don't quit on them. You don't withdraw from them ever, even after the bad days, especially after the bad days. So those are the 7 commitments of a father friend. Self-awareness, breaking the cycle, building positive emotional memory, parenting with the end in mind, embracing authority and affection together, staying teachable, and showing up no matter what. And here's what I want you to hear underneath all of it. These aren't 7 separate tasks you check off a list somewhere. They work together. Self-awareness feeds breaking the cycle. You can't rewrite a story you haven't named. Breaking the cycle makes room for positive emotional memory because you can't build safety while you're still parenting from patterns you've inherited. Parenting with the end in mind is what lets you hold authority and affection together instead of picking a side. Because you're not managing today, you're building toward a relationship 20 years from now. And staying teachable and showing up, those 2 carry you through the days when you fail at the other 5. I didn't write these because I've mastered them. I wrote them back in the day because I needed them. I needed something to come back to on the days when it would be easier to just check out, to justify my anger or withdrawal, to default into whatever the day handed me instead of choosing to father on purpose. That's what a commitment is for. It's not proof you've arrived. It's a rail you hold on to so you don't drift. And you come back to time and time again when you do fail. This is the episode where purpose stops being a concept and starts becoming a decision. You've heard the framework across this whole series. You've heard why it matters. Now, it's just about which one of these 7 you need to lean into this week. Maybe not all 7 at once. That'll wear you out and you'll quit by Thursday. Just pick one of them to focus on. Live it on purpose this week instead of defaulting into whatever's easiest. That's really the whole heartbeat of this series. Fatherhood on purpose. Every single day, you're deciding or you're defaulting. There's no third option. The dad who shows up intentional today is deciding to do so. The dad who lets the day just happen to him is defaulting. These 7 commitments are simply 7 places where that choice gets made over and over for as many years as you get to be somebody's father. So put these 7 before you and keep them before you. In fact, I have a printed card of these 7 commitments that you can put someplace. You'll see them every day. A mirror, a truck visor, in your Bible, wherever you'll run into them on a regular Tuesday morning. If you want one, just send me an email and I'll be happy to get that card to you. So a couple things before we wrap up. 1, if this episode was useful to you, please tell another dad about this podcast. I depend on you to spread the word. Dads need to be equipped and encouraged. I hope you'll share this resource. Also, if you haven't pre-ordered my book, please go to fatherfriend.net and find out how to do it. It has all this information from today's podcast and so much more. So this week, Dad, lean in, lead well, and love big.